So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tiffany Scroggs. I'm with the Washington Apex Accelerator, and I'm joined today by Trina Payton, who's also with the Apex team, and we're here to talk about preparing to bid information and cybersecurity statewide contract through the Washington State Department of Enterprise Services. So welcome, everyone. We're going to get started here. I'm still admitting people in through the waiting room. We are recording today. You will get a copy of the slides, but we will have time for questions. We have about 40 minutes worth of slides, and then we'd love to have an interactive dialogue on what concerns or comments, questions that you might have related to this opportunity. So today's agenda includes talking just high level who's who in government contracting at the state level, as well as the solicitation history, what we could figure out related to this history. We'll review the actual opportunity that's on the street right now. And then we have two tools that we emailed about an hour ago that are in your inbox that include a pre-bid checklist, as well as a bid, no bid decision matrix. And these are for you to have and to adapt and to make them your own as we kind of walk through how to use them and how to customize them to your needs. So if you're just joining us, welcome. We've asked you to introduce yourself in the chat and say hi. This is a nice space for you to network with each other, as well as with Trina and I, who work for the Washington Apex Accelerator. Also on the line is Cedric Austin with the Washington State Department of Enterprise Services. So hi to Cedric. He usually chimes in from time to time, especially when we get to that Q&A. All right. So a little bit about Apex, who we are. We are funded in part by the federal government to help businesses navigate government contracts. We exist to help Washington-based firms excel in the public sector. And so we offer no-cost advising services and training services related to that. For this particular training, we're under partnership with the Washington State Department of Enterprise Services, who wanted to make sure that businesses across the state were aware of how the statewide contract system works and how businesses can be a part of it. We have a team of advisors across the state. No, excuse me. You can connect to your local advisor just by going to washingtonapex.org. All right. So the difference between Trina and I at the Washington Apex and official government agency people is pretty big. The difference is big. And so I wanted to take a minute and highlight who we are in contrast. So the state government people who are not on the line right now, they're official contracting officers. They're procurement professionals. They're called different names, but those are the top two. They are the only ones authorized to spend taxpayer dollars. So as a result of that, they cannot help you bid. They have to be fair and impartial, and they can never give a perception that they're giving anyone else a competitive advantage. Apex, on the other hand, Trina and I, we work for nonprofit. Work for the Thurston Economic Development Council in Lacey. We have colleagues at Green River College and other economic development organizations around the state. And we are authorized only to provide advice. So we provide technical assistance through counseling and education. We can review your bid proposal. We can suggest improvements. We can strategize on a marketing plan and everything else in between. So who's who continued. Let's talk a little bit about who's who at the Department of Enterprise Services. So identifying these decision makers will help you kind of know who you're talking to when, so you can avoid delays and any miscommunications. So with this particular solicitation, you're going to be working with the Team IT Professional Services. So this is a team within Department of Enterprise Services. Julia is the lead contact on the solicitation. And so when you email that generic Team IT email, it goes to Julia as well as a couple other people. And they do that just to make sure that the workflow continues if somebody has vacation or something. But you can assume that Julia and her colleagues have a deep knowledge of procurement law. They're the ones that are going to receive your complaints or your questions. They're called procurement coordinators, procurement professionals. They are authorized to spend the taxpayer dollars. So those are the official people. If they receive your question, they will publish it for all to see. That's part of them being fair and impartial. But keep in mind that Julia and her colleagues within DES are not your customer. Okay, they're creating a statewide contract for agencies, excuse me, to use to satisfy their needs. So you might have another customer within Department of Enterprise Services, but Julia is creating the platform for those folks to go shopping. It's not going to be Julia who you have to pitch to necessarily. It's who's using the proposal process to assess and evaluate companies. The customer are going to be state agency representatives. They're mandated to use this contract. So that's going to be a big bulk of the spend. Local governments and institutions of higher ed, they're going to be invited to use this contract. And a lot of them tend to do that because the DES contracts are usually pretty well done to where it saves them a ton of time from having to go out and compete on their own. So local governments can use this statewide contract once it gets let. You can learn more about IT contracts and sign up for their contracts connection little update newsletter thing at the link provided in the slide here. I would highly recommend you do that. There's been major changes over the years, and they continue to change with how they're doing the IT contracts within the state government. So the PI team, I mentioned the PI team earlier. Cedric Austin is here today, and he helps procurement professionals increase the diversity, equity, and inclusion in public purchasing. He helps enhance awareness about what the state is buying and how they're buying it. But keep in mind that he's not the authoritative source, so he won't be spending any taxpayer dollar money. He's kind of a helpful liaison. Hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn there. Cedric, if you want to pop in and introduce yourself, now would be a great time.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sure a lot of people that are on the call I've reached out to or spoken to at any kind of, one of the many events that we all attend to. And yes, you are absolutely right, Tiffany. I am more of a liaison and can help you kind of find some different resources and things to assist you with your proposal. But ultimately, it's going to be up to you. And working with Apex is a great step towards, good, well written, well thought out proposal. So thank you.
Great. Thanks for being here, Cedric. Webs is a system that you should have a login to. They should be able to hop in there and download the solicitation. I had one request for somebody to send the solicitation over, and it makes me nervous when people ask me to do that because it tells me that they don't know how to get into Webs or they don't have an active login. You must have an active login into Webs. That's the authoritative source. Another player in state procurement is the Office of Minority and Women's Business Enterprises and the Washington State Department of Veteran Affairs. The OMWBE certifies businesses as well as the Veteran-Owned Business Program over at the VA. And then Apex. We are government-funded nonprofit org here to advise your business. So that's the who's who of government contracting. So it's important to know who you're talking to and when and why, and then record those conversations. And that'll help you stay organized and know who you're talking to. So this particular solicitation, we're going to talk a little bit about the history before we dive into what's actually on Webs and how to dissect it. So DES manages statewide contracts that has over 2,000 vendors, that's businesses, and $2 billion in spend. So a lot of activity happens. The DES folks are pros. They know how to set up these statewide contracts, and they mandate state government users to use them. That's usually commonly purchased goods and services. So if you have a super innovative thing that government doesn't know they need yet, the statewide contract system is probably not for you. That's going to be commonly goods and services that they know they need. Staff at DES conduct market research internally, and they're like, who needs this contract? And then they determine whether or not they actually need a cybersecurity contract. So historically, there's this big giant ITPS, IT professional services contract that was just mega. It had over 700 vendors, and it was it had pretty much everything IT. It kind of grew and ballooned to this big behemoth thing. They are now in the process of kind of carving out IT procurements based on different categories. They've done 2 so far, and this is going to be the 3rd one. And as you know, the focus of this one is information and cybersecurity. So when we look at the, I say on the slide, cybersecurity is sort of a new contract because of course they were buying cybersecurity services and information services, but they didn't really have a category that we can track the spend on. So we don't really know how much the state has purchased in cybersecurity services. We do know that if they wanted to do it right now before this contract gets going, there's two ways that they can do it primarily. One is through, they have a relationship with what's called NASPO, Value Point Information Security Services contract, which is a contract that's nationwide, essentially, that states can hop onto if they want, and the state is hopped onto, so they can buy information security services through that. And there's also the current IT professional services, where if you look at the categories, some of the IT cybersecurity stuff is kind of embedded in there. For example, infrastructure services. If you look at the IT professional services contract and then dip into the infrastructure services scope, you'll see some cyber related contacts or cybersecurity scopes of work in there. So what's going to happen after award? So they're going to put all y'all hopefully on the contract. You have to competitively bid, right? And then once you get on there, if you're one of the awardees, you'll be listed on the statewide contract site. And specific state agencies or local governments can essentially hop on there and send you a scope of work. You review and submit back your quote for doing work. And then each quarter, you report to DES the contracts that you've been awarded as a result of being on their contract. I put in bold there that there's no guarantee you're going to get any work. And that's really important. I wanted to point out that the recently awarded IT project management services contract has been around for, I think, just over a year. And it has 114 vendors on it. So pretty big, vibrant contract with a lot of vendors. They've spent $17 million on it in 24 and what's started on 2025 to 28 of those vendors. So 24% of the vendors on the project management contract have received work so far. It is a multi-year award. And those vendors are out hopefully marketing themselves and the contract. Like I said, that former IT professional services contract that's still kind of out there because they're still working on different scopes. It got so big and crazy that agencies kind of found other ways to get what it is they need. So I would imagine it's going to take DES just like maybe a little while to get folks used to coming back to this contract and getting the word out that they have a statewide contract for information and cybersecurity services, and you have to help them do that with a marketing strategy. So,
Tiffany, can I
oh,
make a point?
yeah, come on in.
So some of those, like myself, that I used to be an entrepreneur before I became a counselor. I was on the previous contract, and the previous contract before they put these statewide contracts in place was more of a roster system, and it was not an actual contract that had very many guardrails in it, which allowed agencies to go about getting IT services from just people that were actively marketing them. So putting these contracts in place from my perspective is the DES and the state's effort to try to corral some of that into making sure that all of the vendors have a certain level of expertise that they're offering, and it's not being just based off of who you know and whether they've done business with you. So there's real opportunity here for those that have qualifications that stand out for them to get on the contract and then put in place a marketing program that will help you. So I hope that's not too far off the subject, but I just wanted to do a contrast for those that have been in the game a little bit and know what it used to be, and this is not that.
Great. Yeah, I think they were calling that two-tier,
Yeah.
that roster system, and that's no longer the case. Although I do have like kind of an open gray area where once firms are on the contract, it's, say there's 60 firms on it in a particular category, the agency, they just get to pick whatever 60 they want out of those 60 and send them a scope and off they go. Is that how the non two-tier is working?
Well, the previous contract that we were on, it wasn't even two-tier. I mean, it was just, it had no guardrails whatsoever. And then as they tried to corral it in, it became two-tier. And now that two-tier doesn't exist. If they like your services well enough and your price is competitive, an agency can award directly to you. So I'm glad you brought that up, Tiffany, because that's an important distinction for a lot of companies that spend a lot of time talking to the client and finding out what their requirements are, only then to have it competed out and having to go that way. So this is real opportunity.
Great. Thanks, Trina. That's so helpful.
Mhm.
Yeah, I didn't properly introduce your background, but you have an extensive background in this particular solicitation topic. So I'm so glad you're here.
Okay.
This is what it looks like on Webs, the current opportunity. Again, the only authoritative source. If Trina and I send you something we've found on Webs, like don't trust it, even though you could probably trust it. Always go to Webs, always download it, always label it with the date you downloaded it. And that way, when there's amendments, and there will be amendments, then you can know what version you're working with. You also want to check your commodity codes. If you didn't get notified about this, your commodity codes are way out of whack, or you're not active on Webs, because they included every commodity code under the sun. And so a lot of you might have received this notification and you're like, don't even do cybersecurity. And that's just because they included all the ones that might include cybersecurity. Later on, when you're scrolling down on Webs, you can see the vendors that have downloaded. Sometimes this is interesting to peruse and see if your competitors are listed. Sometimes it might not be apparent what name your competitor is using to get the documents downloaded, but essentially this is kind of who downloaded it. That could tell you any number of things. It could be they're interested in bidding as a prime. It could be that they're interested, but they want to sub. Or any number of things, or they're somebody like me that has no intention of bidding, but downloaded it just to prepare for today. You also want to see your name on there and see if you're listed as a small business or as a veteran-owned business. Those are the two designations that give you a competitive advantage on this particular solicitation. You can also check your own profile within Webs. So I clicked on my profile and you can see right there that I am considered a Washington small business. So then if we continue scrolling down on Webs, you'll get to the very important part at the very bottom of the Webs posting, the solicitation documents. And there's a lot of them. You want to make sure that you download all the ones that are relevant to you, which would include most all of them, except maybe there's an exhibit that's not relevant to you, but go ahead and download it, read it, make sure that what it is you do has no relevancy. You want to read and understand all the documents. That's kind of a given. And also be aware of any embedded links that link you to a new document that you would also want to download and date and kind of be familiar with. So this process can take a little while, which is why now's a good time to kind of zoom out and talk about what we're doing here. So if you're interested in pursuing this opportunity, the first thing is to download and read the documents. You want to hone in on the solicitation document as well as that Exhibit B, which is the scope. Then you want to decide if you want to bid or not. And we have a tool about that today. And if you decide to bid, then you want to organize your approach. You want to assemble and submit on time. You have to submit on time. Late submittals are not allowed. So we've created a pre-bid checklist that is super helpful when you're dissecting a giant solicitation like this one is, because it doesn't necessarily read like a novel. It's not very entertaining to read. No offense to Julie and her team, but it's going to be a legal document written with legal words. And so if you can create a little checklist for yourself to kind of pull out the most important pieces, that can be a very helpful thing. Some people like to print it and highlight and tab. You're IT people, so I don't think that, well, maybe you do. But either way, you want to have the proposal checklist in hand, customized to what is important to you. So we gave you a template to start with. And if I could get some few brave characters on the line today to help me fill this out together. We're not going to do the whole thing together. We don't have time for that, nor would you really want to, but we're just going to pull out a few pieces so you can see how to use this template that we've provided you. So does anyone want to pull up the solicitation document and tell me what the solicitation number is? This is what I put on the top of every solicitation checklist that I create for myself. Anyone want to throw out there in the chat or unmute and shout it out, the solicitation number? I'm giving away gold stars to people that play my little game today. So, hey, John gets the gold star. All right. Thank you, Vidya. Wonderful. Yeah, I think you're right. 16222. When is the deadline to submit? When is this thing due? December 3rd. That's right, at 11:59 p.m. The time of day doesn't seem super important now, but I have a feeling when December 2nd comes around, the time of day on December 3rd when it's due is going to be really important. And I found that information, and so did Vidya, on page 6. So that now I have kind of like where I found the information and where I can go back to reference it later, and that could be helpful. There is a pre-proposal event tomorrow that Julie is putting on where she'll walk through the solicitation. She'll walk through why and how and all of that. I highly recommend that you try and attend. It's via Teams at 9 a.m. tomorrow, and the link to that is also on page 6. There's no site visit date. Again, this template is generic and we use it for all of our clients in a variety of industries. So if you were in construction, this would be a really important point to have on there, is when the mandatory site visit is. But since that's probably not a thing in your world, you can go ahead and take it off if you'd like. The Q&A period. So this is a really critical opportunity for you to have that dialogue with the procurement coordinator that you don't get otherwise. Right now, everything's pretty locked down. She can only engage with you via that Q&A. So you could submit a question up until November 18th. And after that, there's no guarantee that she's able to answer. She has to process those questions and then publish the answers and the question for the whole world to see. The solicitation was issued on October 15th. That's also on page 6. And then this section here are the reserved awards. We also might call them preferences in some worlds, or set-asides, or any other competitive advantages that might be included on this solicitation. Has anyone dove into that and knows whether or not there's a competitive advantage? I have a feeling somebody's typing the answer, and yes, there's a competitive advantage for Washington small or veteran-owned businesses. The veteran-owned business designation does not have a size, but they're all Washington-based businesses. And if you have questions on whether or not you qualify, we're happy to dive into that later. That competitive advantage is described on page 4 of the solicitation, and it talks about how we're going to do, I think it's 42 main awards and then an additional 18 reserved awards for small and veteran firms that didn't make it into the main award cut. So that's a pretty big competitive advantage for firms that meet that eligibility criteria. So how do I submit this thing? Where on webs do I submit it? That's a trick question, because you're actually going to email it unzipped to the procurement coordinator. And that's described on page 9. There's limits to the size and all that jazz. One thing to really hone in on, and this will help us in our next segment of the bid, no bid decision, is the type of solicitation. Like how does it work? How am I going to be evaluated? If it was 100% price and you were not the lowest bidder out there, you might think twice about whether or not you can actually compete. This one, however, the scoring, which is found on page 10, has significant points for non-cost factors. And cost factors are about a quarter of the points, 250 points. And then there's an additional other 5 points for an executive order compliance. Okay, the type of contract. This is also important because sometimes the contract prices, you want to know what your risk is if you when you're going to do your pricing. And so, is this firm and fixed, or is it negotiated after award, or how does the pricing work on this? So for statewide contracts of this type, the contract prices, you're going to put in a maximum hourly rate that you can charge, and you'll be like held to that. That's firm and fixed for 12 months. And then after that, DES is very graciously giving you a 5% price escalation. and that's automatic at the end of 12 months. I've actually never seen one that nice. So whatever you guys did to sweeten up the IT people at DES, keep at it because it's working. It's not tied to an index, it's just 5%. Where did I find this information, by the way? Does anyone know? You get like 3 gold stars if you happen to know that I did not find this in the solicitation or in Exhibit B or in Exhibit C. I found it in Exhibit D, the contract on page 4. So we always recommend that you hone in on the solicitation and Exhibit B, and the contract is so important. A lot of people skim over that and be like, yeah, if I win, I'll bother with reading that. But really, there's some really important things in there that help you assess the risk of bidding, the risk of underbidding, the risk of the whole program in general, like what am I being obligated to, and your ability to really perform. So a lot of times the insurance exhibit is important to hone in on. In that Exhibit D, I always go direct to the price escalation, especially if like tariffs are involved and that kind of stuff. Like there's just so many important things in Exhibit D. So be sure to read that one as well. Okay, so that's the pre-bid checklist. We recommend that you kind of open up the solicitation, open up your checklist, go through it, read it all, pull out important information that will help you decide whether or not you think you can bid. So, and I just kind of gave away the next section, which is bid or no bid. You want to make sure you conduct this analysis for your company and make sure that the solicitation is aligned with your goals, with your proficiencies, with what you're good at, and your likelihood of success. You don't have time to bid on everything under the sun, or maybe you do, but a lot of small businesses don't. You're busy. And so by kind of doing this analysis, it forces you to slow down and read the solicitation and think about why you want this work and how you're going to bid. And this, how you're going to bid competitively, most importantly, right? So you only want to bid stuff that you want to do after award and the stuff you can win. So we have another toolkit for you that you can, this is Excel, so you can totally make it your own. You can take out all of our questions here and input your own questions. But the idea is that you do an analytical, non-emotional assessment of whether or not you can bid. So can we bid is the first question. And underneath that, we've brainstormed some typical questions. Can you meet the technical requirements in that Exhibit B? Can you meet the scheduling requirements? I'm sure they're kind of listed in there. Do you understand the risks of this program, right? So if you put all your eggs in this basket, will it go away in the next year and it won't be worth it? That kind of thing, like, and that won't happen, but that's a risk. Does your experience match the needs? So I mentioned before, the points are not just price. The points are a lot of qualitative areas. So you want to look at that closely and kind of self-assess whether or not you can bid. Anyway, we're not going to go through all these. What you do is take the question and score yourself 5 to 1, 5 being yes, we can do all of this, or 1 being nope, I got to come up with a good mitigation strategy for that, whether it be, you know, all sorts of ideas, subcontracting or going to go get the technical expertise on my team. The second question you want to ask is, do we want to bid? So is this core to our business? Are you, you know, is cybersecurity like that other thing that you do on the side from time to time, or is it really what you want to focus on? Is there additional work after this program? So keep in mind, this is a multi-year award that is mandatory for state agencies and optional for others. So there's a big opportunity there. Even though I said there's no guarantee of work, there is a lot of opportunity. Anyway, you score yourself and then total it up, and then you decide what a good score is or not. That's not for anyone else to decide but you and your firm. Trina, you've used this bid, no bid matrix in your businesses. Can you talk a little bit about anything else that I might have missed or any tips?
Yeah, you know, as we went through, and I was in IT, I did IT services. We were primarily a federal government provider of services. But as we matured our process, I took away the yes or no question, and I replaced that question with, what will it take for me to win? And if it took too much for me to sacrifice or provide in terms of resources for me to win, that's how we got to our we're not going to bid, right? So it's the same question, but it's reframing it in a way that says, well, we can win everything, but what will it take for us to win? Maybe it'll take for us to bring in partners, or maybe we will need to mature our pricing strategy in order for us to be competitive and put in some strategic changes or that need to be made to our processes. So what will it take for you to win the contract is really the question for most people that have at least the minimum qualifications that are listed on there. So sometimes reframing the question can help you a little bit, but I will tell you our ability to win consistently changed a lot once we started with this process. So whatever the process looks like to you, this is an important vetting process in anything that you're going to do, especially with the government, because there's so much work that needs to be done in order for you to compete successfully.
Great. That's so good, Trina. Thank you. All right, so you've read the solicitation docs, you decided whether or not you're going to bid. You are now in the kind of organizational approach and submittal kind of time frame. Keep in mind that your Apex Accelerator advisor can help kind of at any stage along the way. You can, if you're not yet connected to a Washington advisor, you can email us if you're in Washington State. If you're out of state, that's okay. We have advisors out of state as well. And you can find them at the napex.us website listed on the slide here. All right, so a couple of tips before we open it up for Q&A. I think I have 3 or 4 more slides before Q&A, so feel free to put, I saw 1 or 2 questions already. Feel free to put your questions in the chat. You want to ask questions and identify your barriers to participation now. If there's something in there that's holding you up, like there's no way, the state's crazy, I'm not doing that, I tell them, like in a nice way, that there is a big barrier for you to participate. And it very well may turn into a modification or amendment to the solicitation. They want people to bid, I promise. Like that's their whole thing, is to get a big giant bidder pool so they can pull the best of the best into the award spots. Also, if you don't identify barriers now, you kind of lose your right for a successful protest later. Not always, but kind of like, well, why didn't you bring this up earlier? Why didn't you complain? It kind of lessens your arguments there for a protest.
If I can interject something,
Yeah.
Tiffany, this is such an important point because if you identify something, it may be a barrier for you, but I guarantee you there's probably other people out there that see that same barrier, and a slight change is something that they would, not even slight, some changes that they would consider, you would be surprised. So tomorrow during the pre-bid meeting, it's a great time to use the chat and use the question and answer section to identify some of those things and some of those questions that they should be looking at so they can get a greater audience of people that are bidding on their contracts, because the expertise that you have, they need. So if you bring it up, I guarantee you someone else will second that and say, yeah, I see that too, and that would be a problem for me. And if enough people say it, they will seriously consider how they can make changes to accommodate those additional bidders.
Yeah, and even if you did hear your concern be expressed during the pre-bid session tomorrow, go ahead and put that in the Q&A and
Mm-hmm.
submit it anyway. And then they know at
Mm-hmm.
least there's 2 of you that feel the same. Yeah, good point. Thank you. You want to ask for a debrief to really understand. I mean, DES is pretty good about sending out the bid tabs, so you know exactly how you scored, but asking for a debrief can help enlighten you even further as to how you can improve for the next one. And that's a privilege that you have as a bidder to request that. If you didn't win, work with us and see where the other opportunities are, and see if the successful contractors need subs. You can target those agencies that aren't mandated to use this particular statewide contract. You could go after federal work, that kind of thing. You want to save all the documents, I already mentioned this, with the date you received them. If you have any draft documents or, I actually didn't check to see if there was an RFI on this or anything like that. If you have anything old, go ahead and archive it and mark it as archived. You also want to lastly double check that your size status is correct in WEBs. That's a self-attestation that you need to do. And then if you're a veteran-owned business in Washington State, you still have time to go ahead and get certified. Shamika is standing there waiting for you to submit your VOB certification packet, and she's usually really quick about turning those around. So I wanted to take this opportunity, because you are all cybersecurity people, to go off topic and talk a little bit about federal CMMC. So as I mentioned earlier, Trina and I have another hat where we help defense contractors sell to the Department of Defense, and we're in the thick of a big, huge change related to cybersecurity. And I just wanted to make you aware that the DoD's CMMC, which is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, is now in effect as of November 10th, or it's coming soon. And what that means is it'll start showing up in solicitations, requiring businesses to comply with all of the cybersecurity requirements. And so similar to this solicitation at the state level, it's based on NIST standards. And so they have an accreditation body out there where you can become a registered practitioner, you can become a third-party assessor. And I looked this morning, and there are 2 third-party assessors in the West Coast in our time zone. That is not enough to satisfy the demand that's going to be coming for folks that are doing work on defense-related projects that require the third-party certification. Not everyone needs a third-party certification, but if you're working on certain contracts, you will. So anyway, heads up on this. We have a big event happening right now today in Kitsap related to CMMC, but if you ever want to talk with the cybersecurity or with one of our Apex team about the requirements that defense contractors are undergoing, please reach out to Apex. We can help orient you to that.
Yeah, and I would say that any company that has that on their radar to become certified, it's a good idea to let us know, because we are probably going to be needing to refer clients to more and more people, and that would be a good thing for us to know that you're out there pursuing that, even if you're not on the roster yet.
Yep. Yeah. And you're local. Like ideally we know. We're getting hit up probably weekly with firms out of Virginia or Chicago or wherever that are saying, hey, I'm a new registered practitioner. I'm happy to work with your clients. And so we're getting a lot of those hits. We usually go to the accreditation body website, to the marketplace, or direct our clients there. But yeah, exactly. Like Trina said, we want to know that you're out there doing that program. Okay, enough on that. Well, back to the topic and and this is our Apex program sponsors, just so you know who we're funded by. That is always helpful. And then our contact information. So training at washingtonapex.org will go to me and a couple other people, and we'll be quick to respond. Again, if you're not in Washington State, that's okay. There's an Apex Accelerator close to you. Okay, now we get to the fun part of your questions. Let me scroll back up. Let me actually stop sharing real quick. There was a question related to, where did it go?
Yeah, I answered a couple, but
did
I'd like
you?
for you to go over go over some of the questions that they had.
Oh, the meeting. Yeah, perfect. The question, I was talking about the businesses that have won work on the project management statewide contract. And somebody, I said it was $17 million to 28 firms, which was 14% of the awardees. And somebody said, what's the median dollar amount? And what I can do is just give you the pivot table that I used, and you can calculate that or do whatever you want with it. You could even see who the top IT project management company is on this list. So I'll go ahead and put this in the chat right now, and you can have the data yourself. I'm not going to use Excel on the fly to show how terrible my Excel skills are to calculate the median, but I know you could do it faster than me. Anyway. All right, next question here. And keep in mind too, that this is just project management. So this is different scope than what you're dealing with. We don't have cybersecurity past spend. We don't know.
Mhm.
We know that agencies are always getting hacked and that they should probably spend more on cybersecurity. It's editorial comments. Okay, I couldn't figure out the proposal could be submitted as prime sub team. Can you confirm? Okay, that's a good question, Vita. I don't know if there's limitations on subcontracting. Trina, did you run across that at all?
I didn't see any, which means that it's open season. And they do have the inclusion document for those companies that are large businesses. So that tells me that subcontracting is completely allowed. And how you use your subcontractor when you're answering the Exhibit B questions in terms of qualifications, I would ask for some additional clarification on that if you're using the qualifications of your subcontractors to win a prime contractor award.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Good. When you look at the qualifications, can those be fulfilled by partners or vendors? So again, the how are you going to be evaluated if you can be evaluated based on the performance of your sub? I think is a similar question to what Vita asked earlier, right? Trina, that question there by John is similar.
Yeah, it's very similar, and it's a great question because I didn't see any guardrails around that, right? Which
Yeah.
means that if you as a prime contractor are just doing help desk services, but you have a